Okay. All right, I guess we'll get started. 5 minutes passed, just started the recording. Welcome, everyone, to this month's community call. This is a supplemental, I guess you could say, because we bumped it back a week due to a conflict for last week. So thank you, everyone, for understanding there. So first things first, I will be moderating today. And note taker, we have Waveform for that. So thank you very much, Waveform. Just a heads up that this call is recorded. It will be posted afterwards on YouTube as well as in this Discord. So if you miss something, don't fret. You can always come back and listen to it later. And, sorry, something just broke on my computer here. All right, we'll get started. So just a quick note, I do this every community call, but just wanted to warn everyone about Discord scammers and being safe on Discord. Unfortunately, it's kind of an issue that just doesn't go away. You will get messages from people claiming to be Helium tech support. You'll get messages from people claiming to be moderators and even people claiming to be me or Waveform, the community managers. We will not DM you unless there is specifically something talked about in public that's agreed upon from one of us. But generally, we will not DM you first. There is no Helium tech support here. You will be scammed. Do not input your 12 words or 24-word phrase into any websites, even though people may say it's secure. It absolutely is not. You will not be required to do that anywhere. So please, please, please be adamant about Discord people messaging you. That goes across for all the community as well. That's Reddit. If you're in any other communities, don't click any links, don't input your words anywhere. So just wanted to get that out there. Secondly, so we've had a couple of comments about people joining the Discord and not being able to see some of the channels, specifically the HIP channels. So new HIPs are coming out. We create a channel for them. They're under the section of governance/HIPs. So if you can't see those, for example, there's some new HIPs out. So let's say HIP 126. If you can't see that on your Discord, what you're going to do is in your Discord, top left corner, if you're on the desktop, you'll see 3 links. It will say events, browse channels, and members. Should be at the very top above all of your channels. Click browse channels. And then you'll see a bunch of check marks to all the channels. So what you're going to do at the top is click follow category, and that will follow all of those channels. So specifically, if you can't see HIPs, scroll down to the governance/HIP section, click follow category, and that will automatically follow all of the HIP channels, including any new ones that come out. Just a heads up there. All right, so now that's over with. Noah is up with an engineering update, so take it away, Noah.
Hey, how's it going? So right now we've just got a whole bunch of stuff queued up, especially smart contract upgrades. So we've got the updates to allow device-specific hex boosting queued up. It will probably be going out sometime over the next month. A new feature that allows setting a custom destination on hotspot rewards claims. So the use case for this might be you have multiple wallets that have hotspots in them, but you want all the rewards to be claimed to one wallet. Maybe it's your ledger. Other people are also kind of using this feature programmatically, but we are adding changes to the smart contracts to let this happen, and then we're also adding changes to the wallet app so that you can actually see when a custom destination has been set. And it's pretty important to do the latter because we don't want this to become kind of an exploit angle where someone gets you to sign a bad transaction and then they get to take all of your rewards without actually taking the hotspot. So in the app, it will show you if there's any kind of custom, rewards destination set. Speaking of wallet app, we've got a bug fix going out soon. The Boolean logic for deciding whether an address was owned by a smart contract was flipped. So I'm sure a lot of you have actually seen this warning when you're transferring tokens in the wallet app that it says this is a smart contract owned address. That's actually false right now. Once we fix that logic, then it will be correct. And then you should definitely pay attention to that warning. You should expect to see a warning about a smart contract owned address if you're sending to like a multi-sig. So for example, squads. But if you're just transferring to your friend's wallet, you should not expect to see that warning. And with this release, I think it'll be 2.7.10. We're also going to include some UI to try and prevent address poisoning. So for those of you that don't know, address poisoning is this trick that scammers use where, a lot of people have a workflow where, let's say they're sending tokens to an exchange. They might send one HNT to Coinbase just as a test transaction, make sure that it landed in Coinbase, and then go send the rest. The problem is there's two ways to send the rest. One way is to just copy the address directly from Coinbase again, which is what you should do. But what some people are doing is they go into their transaction history trying to find where they sent one HNT. They copy that address and then they paste it in their next send. What an attacker does is they wait until you send one HNT to Coinbase and then they send you a couple tokens, a really, really small amount of tokens, so that when you go through into your transaction history, the transaction at the top of your transaction history is not actually the transaction of you sending a test transaction to Coinbase. It's actually the exploiter. And oftentimes they'll actually grind out public keys so that the first four and last four characters of the public key look exactly the same as the Coinbase address. So you even think that you're copying the Coinbase address, and then you actually send your tokens to the wrong address. So to mitigate this, we're adding icons to the transaction history that lets you know whether or not you actually signed that transaction. So it'll be a blue arrow out indicating that you signed the transaction and a green arrow in indicating it was just a transaction that you received, but you didn't sign it. This is not like the final UI UX for this. I think there's a lot more we can do here, but this is a low hanging fruit to at least hopefully give people some idea that, hey, this like transaction is not the one where you sent money to the exchange. So hopefully this will reduce the instances of address poisoning happening.
And just in the meantime there, so the solution is, for example, the one you use sending a token to Coinbase, go to Coinbase and copy the link directly from Coinbase.
Yeah. And generally speaking, like I never use transaction history as a way to get an address. Always take the address from the source. If you copied your address from Coinbase and you're going to send HNT to it as a test transaction, that's great. That address is still on your clipboard. So just paste that address again. Don't go into the transaction history. But, it's going to be hard to get people to do that. So, we're going to try and make the UI so that this foot gun isn't possible.
One thing that might be worth sharing. This is a problem that actually initially started on right now on Ethereum. Like there's a lot more volume of transactions that were sort of having this kind of issue there. People are starting to notice that since Solana is such a cheap chain, it's very cheap to be able to spin up a wallet and cheap to send a small amount of tokens towards you. They're able to kind of do this very, very cheaply. It's a cheap attack. So it is important that wallets like ours are building features to prevent this kind of thing. It's a spam problem, and unfortunately, spam does affect people. And we'll keep working on ways to reduce the impact of this kind of spam.
Yep. So that's it for the address poisoning. There's going to be a new hotspots UI coming out into the wallet app with 2.8.0. I'm not exactly sure when we're releasing that. We're testing it. But that'll actually allow you to view your hotspots in a map view, which is, sometimes nicer since not everybody has the name of their hotspots memorized and where they are. We are adding elevation and azimuth to the on-chain structs for mobile hotspots. And then still very much a work in progress, creating the user interfaces for proxy voting, which will be in both Helium Vote and the wallet app. So pretty good amount of work left to do there just because we're implementing it in 2 places. But that is it for the engineering.
Cool. Thanks, Noah. And yeah, just on that note for 2.8.0, those of you who've been around Helium for a while, that was a feature, I believe, in an old version of the app that you could see your hotspots on the map. I know a lot of people have been asking for it. I've played with it. It's awesome. I think you guys are going to love it. So thank you for that, Noah.
One more
yeah,
thing
very
to add. Noah, do you want to give a quick update on proxy voting, where we are with the smart contracts?
Yeah, so the smart contracts for proxy voting are done. I think we still need to get them audited. It's really just one additional smart contract and then a few endpoints to the voter stake registry smart contract. So we'll need to get those audited. The main time left for this is just a lot of pixel pushing and getting it into the UIs. So I'm I don't know, I'd say probably 75% of the way done with the web UI, and then we've got to get the designs sorted out for the mobile, like the wallet app, and then also implement those.
Yeah, and our goal here is that once we have a good sense of what the UI will look like for the native app and what it looks like for the web, we can start to encourage people to announce themselves as proxies. And we're working with a couple of other teams in the Solana ecosystem, one in particular, to sort of make this UI better, and actually use other tools that are out there. And excited to talk about that soon. But essentially, it'd be great if someone could post a tweet, and that tweet directly allows you to assign your voting power, and just your voting power, to a proxy. Right? That's our hope.
Yeah, I think the idea here is we want this to be more than just, I'm giving my votes to another wallet and I have to know the wallet ID. I think Realms already had something similar to that and has limited usage. We want this to be a fairly public-facing thing where people can actually declare themselves as a proxy, have a profile, and sort of campaign to get people to assign to them if they're not going to, vote directly themselves.
Awesome. Thank you. I just posted the HIP 110 channel in chat. So if you're looking to read up on HIP 110 and proxy voting, click that link. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for the engineering update. We're going to move on to the makers update. So Scott, if you can give us an update there, that'd be awesome.
Can you hear me okay? Just checking on audio.
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, excellent. Just want to make sure it's a little hectic around here. So, yeah, the news on the IoT maker ecosystem is that the list of approved makers, which lives at helium.com/mine, that is now updated for what I'm, air quote, this is the approved maker list. So how did we get here? For the folks that have been around for a long time, the goal of this was always, we wanted an open permissionless network, especially around kind of the manufacturing side. This was originally governed and kind of overseen by the Manufacturing Compliance Committee. All kind of comes under the HIP 19 framework. And we had a public maker ethics doc that was really, that and the economics were really what was intended to keep makers in line. Obviously, many of you know that we had some folks who abused their privilege. And the idea moving forward was to have very clear accountability and guidelines for what makers needed to in terms of their performance going forward. So over the last several weeks, we've been working directly with makers on a new commercial agreement, directly with the Helium Foundation, and being very clear on what their responsibilities are to the network, to customers. That deadline was at the end of last month. And we effectively, so if you go take a look at the Helium blog, that has all of the longer detail on this. Effectively, I think we've got about 4 or 5 makers that are moving off the ecosystem. If you have questions for them, their support links are there. Please get in touch if you have any issues. Unfortunately, the foundation cannot facilitate directly with those makers because they're not in any commercial agreement with us at this point. So I know, again, understand that some people are frustrated. There have been some issues in the past. again, to the best of our ability, really our goal here as an organization going forward is making sure that all of the existing approved manufacturers for the IoT network going forward are going to fulfill their obligations. High level, again, take a look in the blog, but maintaining firmware updates as appropriate, making sure they're responsive to customers, making sure they have sufficient onboarding credits. Unfortunately, these are things that I personally believe are table stakes that everybody should be abiding by, but we want to make sure we had stronger, more enforceability from a legal perspective for makers that are not keeping up with their obligations to the community and to customers. So please go take a look at the blog. If you have any questions, I'm happy to dig on this more in the IoT working group next Monday. Again, this is an evolving process, but this is the next major milestone as far as making sure that we feel confident in the supply side of the IoT maker ecosystem. Some of the stuff that's happening behind the scenes, we do have more organizations coming in to set up OUIs. So great to see that we're seeing more demand from kind of commercial industrial use case on IoT. We want to make sure for some of those commercial players, it is very clear who are the long-term aligned partners on the manufacturing side. Anybody who's still out there deploying coverage in IoT, want to make sure it's very clear. These are our long-term aligned partners. And I have to say, obviously, this is a special shout out to both RAC and Seed. I think they've been especially supportive from an event side, educating people about the Helium network in general, staying very active in Discord. So, I think those organizations really have kind of been a model for what's been, fantastic long-term alignment. But these other organizations that are still listed on helium.com/mine, that's the approved list. To the extent that there are issues, this is just kind of final closing bits. We just don't have the resources to troubleshoot at an individual level. That responsibility falls directly on the maker. They are the vendor. Take the issues to them. But to the extent that we're seeing kind of issues in mass and aggregation, that's when we kind of force their hand to take some actions because they are now bound by contract. So, way forward, Keenan, they are keeping an eye on, who's seeing most issues. We'll keep on them as far as top-ups. Again, they are now obligated to do so. If you bought a hotspot from that maker, you can still onboard that, either if they have onboarding credits or self-onboard, but effectively for the makers that have been removed, they can no longer add any hotspots to the onboarding server as well. So I think that's the crux of it. Again, hit me up in DMs, come to the IoT working group. I'll make sure I make time to be there next Monday since we're still evolving on this, but otherwise, feeling a lot better about the state of things on the maker side for IoT working group. And, obviously some exciting developments on the mobile side is Minted just passed the vote recently. So with a few other logistical issues, they will be coming on soon. So very exciting things on that side. And that's it from me.
Thanks, Scott. On that note, if you see any problems with anything maker related, like Scott mentioned, feel free to ping me or Waveform. Let us know your issues. We can always try and follow up with the maker directly.
Actually, so Keenan, one other thing that I forgot that Wave had pinged me about. So kind of a point of clarification on something. So as part of the change over here, one thing that we did do is, the foundation elected to make a donation in the form of onboarding credits for Nebra. The reason we did this is, Nebra kind of stepped up and granted, they are no longer an approved maker, but because they built and provided community firmware for other makers that are offboard from the ecosystem, we felt like this was a benefit to the community. We felt it should be recognized in terms of their technical contribution, but really that anything that we did here as far as a donation or a contribution really needed to benefit directly the community and customers. So that contribution goes directly to their maker account in the form of onboarding credits. So nothing is going directly to Nebra as an organization. It's specifically trying to help cover on the shortfall when onboarding credits. That is a donation directly from Helium Foundation and our treasury. That does not come out of the IoT Ops Fund, just to be clear. That is all on that one, Keenan.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I just saw a question from Neil there that you already answered. So,
yep.
Perfect. Yeah, just on a personal note too, I've got a synchro bit that's running on Nebra firmware, and it wouldn't be running without that firmware. So definitely appreciative of it. Okay, thank you, Scott. We're going to move to Education Console. Joey, if you can give us an update on that, please.
So a while back, the community passed HIP 102, which was the approval of an educational console for the IoT network. And so what this does effectively is allows people to go and provision a device for testing purposes. And when we say testing purposes, this device will not reward IoT tokens to the hotspots that are responsible for the data transfer of that test device. So this is a sort of gaming prevention measure, which means we can have this thing totally open up for anyone to use. However, the time that that device may stay online is limited to 1 day. So the idea here is that, imagine a classroom setting or a tutorial, someone is able to go and experiment on board, see the coverage of the Helium network and the way things work and what it takes to do that. And then ultimately they're going to go and provision that device on a commercial LNS, a public LNS, or maybe even provision their own, which I have some notes on that later. And so, following the approval of this, it is actually now live. And so we've worked with a community member. This is Ingenious Things, Disk91. Some folks will know them. They are the operator for us on behalf of the Helium Foundation to run this service. And it is available today at edu-console.helium.foundation. And so there's more documentation and more support for this coming soon. One of the really exciting things is because we can do this in sort of this totally open way, we are building tooling so that you can actually provision, run and monitor a device completely within the Helium documentation. And so this will give us ability to build very hands-on tutorials and demos in a very nice narrative way. So I'm excited to have that out there. We're going to continue iterating here, but I encourage folks to go give it a spin.
Thanks, Joey. I posted the link in the chat. I see some conversation going on, so it's scrolling up pretty quickly there, but edu-console.helium.foundation if you want to go try that out. Appreciate the update.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Next up, we got a governance update from Waveform.
Yeah, we've seen a tremendous boost to the number of HIPs in the last few months. Lots of feedback that there are too many. Yes, we're looking at the amount of HIPs, and I've been encouraging the mobile working group to try and look at what they've got. There are many options for aiming and the hex boosting. Those will go through for a vote. Some of those will be probably changed in some way, and some of them could actually be negated by other HIPs that come along. So I'm encouraging people to read HIPs and to analyze them and to critique them, because in that way the authors and the mobile working group and the IoT working group can review them and actually decide, do they support them? And the more support that HIP authors get from the working groups and people within the working groups, the more support that we and Nova can actually offer to implement them. Because the HIP can't go to vote unless someone's actually agreed to implement it. It doesn't have to be us, but it does need an implementer to go to vote. I've updated the HIP template stakeholder list that I'm working through with a couple of people, and they'll be released shortly, tweaking the HIP process to help people to write HIPs. And I'll do a HIP Writers Discord event probably on the 19th of June at the moment. That's the date I'm looking to do it. So anybody interested in writing HIPs, please come along to that. And as I've mentioned before, that'll be recorded, by the way. As I mentioned before, I'm working on some IoT and mobile network change history documents that will go in docs. And my experience of docs is changing, and I'm working on that to enable me to do more documentation when people ask for it. And I'm always looking for feedback, as is in the community call document. There's the HIPs and its lookup sheet, the HIPs and events for IoT and HIPs and events for mobile. That if anybody's got any comments on those, please comment in those, because they will become documentation to reference, so that when people say, for instance, how does the mobile network work? We don't just point at HIP 53, we point at a page that mentions 53, 77, 80, 81, 87, 105. All these other HIPs, it mentions them on that page. And it, for instance, it would discuss hex boosting, not as a combination of 6 HIPs, but how it is now. So that's what we're looking for in the future, to enable people to understand the network and understand how HIPs would affect it if any new ones are created. That's it from me, guys. Always around in the HIP discussion or the HIP governance channel if you need any questions answered.
Awesome. Thank you, Waveform. And yeah, once again, those links to provide feedback are in the community call agenda. So if you just want to scroll up and chat, that is posted. We can also just post it again as well. Or Waveform, if you want to put the links in chat, by all means, go for it.
Okay.
All right. We're going to move on. So we are skipping events and comms today. Those people are actually at an event. So it's no surprise that consensus is going on right now. And we're going to be skipping membership as well, because, again, they are occupied at events. So we're going to move along to the working groups. So first up, we've got the IoT working group, and it looks like we've got an update from BFG Neil. So BFG, I will call you up here. 1 second. There you go.
I thought Joey was doing it. But I can do it if you
Yeah,
want to do it.
want me to warm you up, and then you can dive into 123, 124?
Both of you can do it. Go for it.
All right. Well, I'll kick things off. So the IoT working group, as we know, is sort of a new class of folks. Were voted in a month or so ago. And recently we've been on a very strong push to deliver votable HIPs. And so most recently, the community voted on and approved HIP 116, which was the dev adder price readjustment. And so for a little bit of technical context here, in order to operate devices on the IoT network, they need to be onboarded somehow. The mechanism by which we do that on Helium is that the Helium Foundation retains a net ID, which gives access to a fairly large number of device addresses. What we do with those device addresses, sorry, this is a lot of layers, is we go and allocate those out to any community member who wants to go and run their own LoRaWAN network server, which is the thing that does the onboarding with those device addresses. It used to be the case that the cost of a block of device addresses was $800. So it had to be purchased in blocks of 8, and they were $100 each. And so through sort of calls from the community, it was felt that the price of this was too high. And given that we can fully understand the range of available addresses, we were able to target a lower price. So it now costs $100 for 8 device addresses for 12.5 cents each. So today, thanks to the passing and approval of this HIP, we see the cost to stand up a private LoRaWAN network server is $235. So and this is paid in data credits currently, and I'll note on this in a sec. The cost of an OUI is $100 in data credits. The dev adder is $100 for the 8, and then there's a minimum balance of data credits that need to be attributed to that OUI, and that's 35. There's one more thing that this HIP does that is sort of exciting for the IoT subnetwork, is that it sets a path for us to have these entities paid in IoT tokens rather than data credits. So we are able to build an on-chain mechanism that will do a sort of live conversion of the IoT token, and it will cover the cost and create the entity on-chain. That is not implemented yet, and so in the meantime, the existing process will carry through. So that's a passed and approved HIP. That's great to see. Additionally, the IoT working group is working on a number of other HIPs. So everything ranging from data-only hotspot onboarding, which I think Neil's going to give a little update on. Some updates to proof of coverage to use variable spreading factors, size, and transmit power is in the works. So as it is today, when your hotspot beacons, it does so at some sort of fixed attributes. So this is exploring the opportunity to change that. And then also Neil will give us a little bit of an update on some thoughts around staking IoT tokens in relation to governance on the IoT subnetwork. So Neil, you want to expand a bit on some of those notes? And I might be missing a HIP, but yeah, that's a lot of HIPs going on.
The only thing I say you miss is you're not saying about your new position in the LoRaWAN Alliance. Probably worth noting.
Yeah. Well, and that's because my brain's fried from being on a board meeting this morning. So yeah, I have been appointed to the board of directors of the LoRa Alliance. So it is great to say that, you know, the Helium Foundation and the Helium community as a whole has some direct representation in the entity that represents LoRaWAN globally. And so I'm on calls pretty consistently with the folks there, sort of thinking through the details of how that protocol evolves. And then I will be present at LoRaWAN Live in Munich in just a couple of weeks, actually, and participating in the meetings there. And also seeing some community members along the way. So it'll be good to see some folks in person. Love the GIF. Yeah, Neil, I wanted to leave a little bit of room for you to, I guess, expand a bit on.
Cool. I just wondered if I should just wait for them before I go over them, but happy to do it if you want to.
I'll let you take the charge on it.
Yeah, let's. I'll wait till the end of the call when it's HIP's turn, so the mobile group can talk.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Let's pop over to mobile then.
Okay, that works. Just before we move over to mobile, if you want to follow along with the IoT working group, I just posted the channel in the chat, so it's IoT-working-group. The calls are every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, and they are recorded and posted in the IoT working group channel every week. So if you miss one of the meetings, jump into that channel, click the pins in Discord, and you can go and hear listen to the call. All right, so we're going to move on to the mobile working group, and it looks like Zero Tweets is already up here, so take it away.
Thank you. So I'll give a brief update on overall activities at the mobile working group, since we have a lot of HIP-specific updates, the agenda down below. First of all, we did our election/re-election finish, and 5 members have been re-elected. Some of them are completely new folks. So great to see that we are getting new blood going forward, and hopefully a new set of fresh ideas that can come with it. Secondly, BRS sim, that's been much anticipated for a while has now been launched. So anybody who is a Helium mobile subscriber and wants to be able to connect to the CBRS radios, the beta SIM is available. It's free. All you need to do is basically be a Helium mobile subscriber. It's more of a Nova-specific announcement, but I thought that I'd use the opportunity to click it in there, since much debate has been going on about the availability of the CBRS SIM as it relates to CBRS radios to participate in things like hex boosting, for instance. And lastly, despite my best efforts to not create a lot of HIPs, the mobile working group is continuing to produce quite a bit of HIPs, which we'll talk about later in the agenda. But at least half of them are a variety of different approaches to tackle different gaming. So to highlight some of the important ones, there is HIP 118, which I think pretty much ready to go to vote at this point, and we're waiting for the foundation to put it up for voting, which is a verification mapping HIP. And then there is a whole bunch of HIP that propose different changes to the hex boosting mechanism, and some of those changes actually are contradictory. So a lot of those are in flight, and we'll talk about them later in the agenda. Maybe I'll pause here, and then we can go to me, talk about HIP specific stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Boris. Once again, you can follow along with the mobile working group in the mobile working group channel. Posted that in chat. The mobile working group meets every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. You can find these events in Discord by clicking the events link, and it'll tell you the date and time for your local area, and you can listen in. Same as the IoT working group, although the mobile working group meetings are recorded and posted in the mobile working group channel, so you can listen to them later on. Thank you again. Okay, we're going to move on to HIPs implemented. So we've got mobile HIP 113, reward CBRS as experimental. Rarman, if you want to just touch base on that, it's up to you. You can chime in if you like, or we can move on. It's up to you. I can invite you up here.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's a little bit of background noise, but we can hear you.
Cool. Sorry, just loop me in on the context one more time. I heard the last part of what you said.
Oh, we're just talking about HIPs implemented. HIP 113 was your HIP, and if you had any notes on that. It was implemented on May 10th, but just curious if you had any updates on it at all.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to share. So yeah, since the implementation of HIP 113, I think that some things have gone as expected and some things have gone not as expected. First and foremost, I want to clear up any confusion, because there was a decent amount of confusion about what was the reward percentage that was going to, what was the reward boost that was going to happen for Wi-Fi hotspots once this HIP went live and whatnot. I think a lot of that confusion came from the fact that there was a spreadsheet that was circulated that just had incorrect calculations on it. There, just to clear up any ambiguity, there was absolutely nothing unexpected that happened in terms of the mathematics of HIP 113. It was extremely straightforward. All the CBRS radios saw a 75% drop in modeled coverage points unilaterally across the board. There was no preference for any type of indoor or outdoor radio. Just as it said in the HIP, everything was reduced by 75%. Now, the calculation for how that actually affected mobile rewards is a little complicated, because you have to calculate the coverage points of other hotspots on the network. So if you're comparing CBRS and Wi-Fi, you kind of have to divide sort of your coverage points by the total coverage points, not just the other CBRS or the other Wi-Fi. So this can be a little confusing to calculate. And it can definitely be hard to reconcile with, in the HIP text, it said that the rewards boost would be plus 130% or something like that. But for a lot of people, it only ended up being, I don't know, 50%, 60%. I can't remember what the actual number was, but it was a lot lower than was in the HIP. Now, the HIP did state that this percentage is a moving target, and so it almost will definitely be different by the time that it goes live, and that's exactly what happened. I think to clear up some more confusion, like why did it change that much? Well, it has a lot to do with hex boosting. So Hotspot occupies a 100x boosted hex, which a lot of Wi-Fi hotspots have been, and CBRS, to be fair. Radios have been also doing that. That allocates a lot of coverage points to those hotspots, which takes coverage points away from other hotspots, right? So because it's kind of a zero-sum game. It is a zero-sum game. So the boosted hexes are a big reason why you're not seeing as much of an increase on the Wi-Fi hotspots, because although the Wi-Fi hotspots now have more coverage points relative to the CBRS hotspots than they did before 113, there are also hotspots and boosted hexes that are taking up a whole lot of those modeled coverage points, right? So in a 100x boosted hotspot, it's like, imagine like a Wi-Fi hotspot and a 100x boosted hex. It's like adding 100 Wi-Fi hotspots to the network that you have to now split rewards with. So this is why 113 was not as impactful as some people expected. But that being said, like mathematically, this is exactly how everything was supposed to work. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. It's just that there is an outsized impact from boosted hexes. And of course, any Wi-Fi hotspots before 113 are now going to even have a higher relative boost after 113 compared to CBRS. But that also takes away from other Wi-Fi. So I know that's all really complicated. I know for some people in the audience, you're going to be well acquainted with this math, and you're going to be like, yes, of course, that's how it works. But I do recognize that for others, it's going to be a little confusing to do all this math, and I totally sympathize with that. So I think personally, how do we get back to the intended effect of 113? I do think there needs to be some adjustments to hex boosting, including my personal opinion is removing 100x boosts. But that's a topic for another place and time. Maybe that'll happen later in this call. There are a couple of HIPs that are trying to address that, including, I believe it's 121, which is the one I'm looking at and maybe collaborating to make some updates to. So yeah, long story short, I'm happy about HIP 113. I think it was a success. There are some people talking about activating the reversal option or wondering when that might happen, given that the CBRS beta sim was released yesterday. But, quick reminder, the beta sim is for power users only. Basically, it's got a very bad user experience for the average person, and I really wouldn't even recommend it to the average person. I would assume that a very, very small percentage of Helium mobile subscribers will actually take it, probably mostly people who already have CBRS radios due to this poor user experience. So this doesn't even come close to the requirements stated in the HIP for reversing HIP 113. So I wouldn't say we're anywhere near the place of thinking about a reversal vote or anything like that, but it is in there for the future scenario where CBRS handoffs become really good, the user experience for installing the SIM becomes really good. And, just to wrap up, I think CBRS is a freaking awesome technology. It's so cool to see that the Helium name and the 5 bars on your cell phone. And I really, really hope that we can figure out a way to make it work going forward. It's going to take a lot of effort from handset manufacturers and others to make this happen in the way that's the most beneficial and can create that great user experience. But I'm really, really looking forward to the day that happens, because I just think CBRS is really, really cool. And it only exists in one country now, but we've got a great amount of enthusiastic community members building it out and putting radios in great positions and creating awesome coverage. So yeah, just looking forward to the future of CBRS. It's not going to happen fast, but I'm glad that, progress is being made. So thanks again, everyone, for discussion and support on HIP 113. And I hope for the Wi-Fi deployers, it's adding a little bit more incentive to do what they do.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I did put in the chat the HIP 113 channel. So if you want to continue discussing 113, Rarman, I know you're in there all the time. So jump in, talk about HIP 113 all you want. All right. Moving on, we've got Mobile HIP 117. This is add minted as a hotspot vendor. Waveform, I don't know if you have anything to add on this one, or if you just wanted to skip along.
Sorry, just to interrupt real quick. The 113 channel actually is locked, so we can't actually talk in there anymore. But if someone wants to at me in discussion channel or anything like that, or just DM me or talk in voice chat, like I'm always down to talk about it. So.
No, you know what? That is my bad. I absolutely just remembered that now.
No worries. Just wanted to make sure people knew.
Sorry, Waveform. Go ahead.
Yeah, on HIP 117, yes, the vote happened, it passed, and the 50 million stake position has been deposited. And now we're just waiting for Minted to do their own announcement about the future of what they're bringing to the network.
I guess we'll hear from Minted or Rack soon enough.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Waveform. So we're just going to move on to HIPs past then. So the first one up is IoT HIP 116, OUI additional address space reshuffle. Joey, once again, please, if you could give us an update on that.
Yeah, I kind of covered that one already.
That is true, you did. Okay. We also, I believe, touched a little bit on HIP 1110, HNT token proxy voting. So we covered that. So we can move on to HIPs expected next for voting then. So Mobile HIP 114, incentive escrow fund for subscriber referrals. Boris, if you can take that one.
Yeah, so this HIP proposes a system that would allow community participants, such as hotspot operators, to earn mobile rewards for referring subscribers into the network. I won't go into the minutiae of how it works. You can read the HIP, but the LDR is that the rewards will be taken out of unused service provider bucket, so it won't actually dilute anybody other than the service provider. And the aim is to allow service providers on the network to, recruit subscribers faster by engaging the community and providing mobile rewards for the community members that actually refer subscribers. We have been iterating on this HIP probably for 2 months now. The biggest blocker up until recently was the discussion between myself and the foundation engineering team, as well as the Nova engineering team, as to what the implementation details would look like. I think that it's largely been settled at this point, and all the changes reflecting this have been pushed to GitHub, and the HIP is basically waiting for the foundation to approve and go to vote.
Awesome. And while you're up here, if you can give us an update on Mobile HIP 118 as well, verification mapping from Helium. Sorry, from Mobile Update.
Yeah, so 118 is another one that's pretty much ready for voting. Again, been in discussion for a while. Lots of different changes have been introduced through, various community suggestions. The summary on this HIP is that it will introduce like a new entity called verification mapper. Verification mappers will be rewarded out of the mapper reward pool. The reward scheme actually has been established a while back with the HIP that actually proposed mapping to begin with. And the general kind of idea behind the HIP is to make it much, much harder to aim the location of the hotspots, and specifically the focus here is on hotspots that are kind of asserting their location and providing coverage to boosted locations. So we have a lot of potential question marks as it relates to, gaming boosted hexes, and this HIP aims to solve, or at least start solving this first and foremost. Again, pretty much ready. Encourage everybody to read the text, but haven't heard any additional comments on it. And I think last week we decided at the mobile working group that it should be going for a vote, and have put in a formal request to the foundation to put 118 for a vote.
Great, thank you, Boris. I did post the HIP channels in the chat, 114 and 118. If you want to hang out on stage for a little bit longer, I think we're going to hear from you again in a few minutes. So that's awesome. Thank you, Boris. Next up, we've got Mobile HIP 119, closing gaming loopholes within the mobile network. Heated Lime, if you want to talk about that one.
Yep. So 119, the gist of it is to limit the amount, the difference between asserted distance and the distance that Skyhook states indoor and outdoor Wi-Fi access points are to range from anywhere to 0 to 75 feet for outdoor, and then 0 to 200 feet for indoor. And then anything beyond that, there's different thresholds will basically make it so if your asserted distance is too far away, you will not receive rewards. Right now, you can assert the hotspots anywhere in the world, basically, or anywhere in the United States, I should say, and you'll still get a 0.25 multiplier, even if it's 1,000 meters away. This HIP would basically prevent that and just implement some specific thresholds that you need to meet as it relates to the distance asserted away. And this is just to kind of prevent gaming and falsely asserting your hotspot in a location that it's not.
Thank you. And while you're up here, if you could talk about Mobile HIP 115, redefining the mobile maker approval process.
Yep. So I've been kind of working with the foundation on 115, just getting the fine details in there. Basically, it's kind of a standard or policy, I guess, that mobile makers will need to adhere to if they want to become a mobile maker on the mobile sub-DAO. It implements minimum balance requirements, a list of things that they need to do, which requires adhering to HIP 53, which requires them to stake 50 million mobile and also be approved by the sub-DAO. It's basically just putting protections in place to ensure that mobile makers have enough balance in their escrow wallet to support the onboards that of the units they sold, to kind of prevent what happened in the IoT world from happening in the mobile world.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Again, posted both of those HIP channels in the chat if you want to go read up on them. Next up, we've got Mobile HIP 125, temporary anti-gaming measures for boosted hexes. Jay Hella, if you want to talk on that one.
Yeah, Keaton, is it possible to push me a few back? I'm also dealing with consensus travel. If there's anybody else to talk first, I'll be free to probably about 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. We'll push you back. Thank you. All right. Well, then next up, we've got new HIPs and updates. We'll circle back to Jay Hella after. So we've got Mobile HIP 120, mobile data connectivity and usability. Fizzy, if you want to come on up. Send you an invite here. Here we go. Take it away.
Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
Great. 120 is basically a different variation of wait a minute. Is a different variation of 111. Basically there is some me and Elon Tusk were the authors of 111, and our ideas kind of split off. I wanted to try to keep it as simple as possible, and it just kind of got a little too complicated in my view. So basically what 121 is just you have to pass 1 DC of credit every 2 weeks to basically get full rewards. If you don't pass even 1 data credit of data, your rewards for POC get cut in half. And this is kind of to determine, more usability. You're in an area that the hotspot is being used, and basically cut out anybody that isn't really providing real utility in terms of data transfer. And just kind of keep it as simple as that. Every 2 weeks must pass 1 DC. That's really not hard to do. It will be paid data only, so free hotspots, free service will not count. It has to be a Helium Mobile subscriber or an offloading partner of Helium Mobile. So that is kind of the limiting factor of that, where 111 provides, says they'll provide, basically free data is included in that. But in order to get paid 1 DC, it has to be paid data. Kind of waiting until an offloading partner arrives for this to really go to vote, because one of the contentions is that there just isn't enough Helium Mobile subscribers for this to be, viable. But once we get an offloading partner, such as AT&T, T-Mobile, or any other MVMO, it's definitely doable. And if you're not in a location that can even offload any data, then you're probably on a wrong spot. That's all I got for that. Just waiting for kind of a timeline on when we'll really get an offloading partner for this to go to vote.
Okay, perfect. I posted in the chat both channels for 120 and 111, so I guess you can compare the two. Yeah. Next up, we've got Mobile HIP 122, and that is also you, Fizzy. So amend service provider hex boosting, if you want to talk on that one.
Yeah, so amend service hex boosting is basically trying to kind of limit the scope of 84. You heard Rarman talk about the hex boosting or 113 before, and how the calculations weren't exact because it really didn't account for hex boosting and how that happened. So there's a lot of people that were kind of put off on the effects of 113. Rewards were supposed to go over here, but they didn't really. They kind of majority went over to hex boosting. So now we have a network that's above, the POC being emitted every epoch is, more than 20% is going to hex boosting areas. So this HIP does a few things. The first one is basically creating a dedicated service provider hex boosting rewards bucket. And that would be achieved by basically cutting out part of the POC bucket and just capping it to a certain percentage. That is going to be 10% of the overall ecosystem. Currently just uses the POC bucket, and that's it. So we'll just be carving out its dedicated little bucket for itself. Another thing it will do is reduce a minimum for the hex boosting to 3 months. Right now it's currently 6 months, and I personally think that's a little too long. Hex boosting is really supposed to just incentivize, hey, this is kind of a short-term bonus for you to deploy here. We need deployments here. And we kind of have deployers going out making contracts, for 6 months, 1 year, however, and it's just like they're not really there for the long term. They're there for just that period. So if we cut down the minimum hex boosting that the service provider is allowed, or the minimum that a service provider can do, it will kind of cut back on that, and deployers will have to really think twice on long-term strategy beyond the 3 months, because it's a lot harder to go up to a person or a business and say, hey, I want to deploy here for 3 months. I want to put this device, this hotspot up on your roof or inside your business, but it's only for 3 months. That's a little bit more like, okay, well, why only 3 months? not like a so one kind of long-term investment from deployers in general. The third thing it will do is limit future hex boosting to 10x. Helium Mobile has already said that they're not going to boost any more than 10x already, but that's kind of just a soft hearsay. We won't do that, so let's just make it kind of in a hip and enforce it for the future, just to put that expectation that there will be nothing more than a maximum of 10 going forward. And that's all for 122.
Awesome. Thank you, Fizzy. And on the topic of boosted hexes, we've got another HIP, Mobile HIP 121, service provider hex boosting improvements from JM. Jay, if you're around, we can get you up here. And I know we're going to circle back to Jay Hella right after Jay, because we're actually discussing boosted hexes again. So first up, JM, if you want to go ahead and talk about 21. Nope. I did see you come up, and I think it got kicked. Let's see if we can get you back. There we go. I think we're having a problem with the connection here, Jay. Let's see. There you are.
Oh, here we go. All right. Sorry,
Perfect.
I'm on mobile.
All good. Take it away.
Yeah, 121 is very simple, meant to be a very simple and straightforward hip. The only thing it does at this point in time is put a cap on the multiplier for service provider hex boosting. It currently is uncapped. There's currently no limits, and as this draft tip is written currently, it would limit it to a 20x multiplier at most. I do expect us to working with Rarman, and we're going to have a pull request to change that from 20 to 10. And hammering out, still need to hammer out what happens with current hexes that are 100x boosted, 50x boosted, that have already been activated. But it's a very simple and, like I said, straightforward hit, because that's really all it does is cap the boost, and we just need to figure out what happens to existing boosts.
Thank you very much, Jay. I did post in the chat as well. So if you want to read up on HIP 121, link is there for you. Okay, Jay Hella, thank you for your patience. If you want to hop up and talk about Mobile HIP 125 temporary anti-gaming measures for boosted hexes.
Yeah, sure thing. Am I coming through okay?
Yep, can hear you great.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm in the consensus vortex like many folks. And I'm sure everyone's pretty tired of boosted hexes at this point, so I'll try to make it pretty brief. But this particular HIP is also meant to be very simple and basically allow service providers to help combat malicious activity specifically for the hexes that they have boosted. So this is meant to be a temporary measure, basically give this tool some guardrails while a more permanent solution has worked, something say like HIP 118. So this isn't really aimed to change the economic or tokenomic structure of boosted hexes in general. It's just that there's a recognition that although boosted hexes have maybe in some ways gotten a bad name because of some of the abuses that have been going on, most specifically, but not exclusively, with indoor hotspots in Miami, and kind of overshadowed some of the benefits that it's bringing in terms of projects in Mexico, attracting potential service providers, and things like that. Maybe a few high points just to be clear, because this is a little bit different than some of other anti-gaming HIPs in the past. This is not a full ban of any hotspots. Those that don't know, boosted hexes is a separate flag from normal POC and data transfer rewards. And so you can receive normal POC and data transfer rewards and not receive boosted rewards. So this is exclusively related to boosted rewards, and the service provider can only impact the hexes that they have boosted, since this is a tool that they're using to hyper incentivize the network in specific ways. The negative externalities that we're trying to prevent are, yes, a reduction in rewards that are impacting those that are non-boosted and those that are legitimately boosting. But it also discourages deployments in boosted areas, because as someone who deploys, if you see that the boost is taken, you're not going to go after it. And I think the last thing that's a little bit goes understated, but a lot of, I think, what's going on from hearing different AMAs and the mobile working group committees is that there is a lot of work going on to attract new service providers. And it's obviously not very good when you're trying to demonstrate, how the network can be built in a very hyper localized way to provide a lot of value, and then to go and test that and show up and then it not work. So that just kind of is a very bad impact on the credibility of that. So anyway, in short, kind of bringing this to close, this HIP aims to be super narrow to avoid, to minimize abuse of power. Very specifically. It's temporary, and it's really just guardrails to put in place while things like HIP 118 are kind of worked through. As far as voting on this HIP, I know from the last discussion in the Mobile Working Group Committee, there is an urgency in terms of trying to get something like this in place because of the abuses that are going on. So we're hoping that we can move this maybe perhaps in the next batch of voting. But I did see Waveform had some good questions that I'll aim to add some context for folks who are reading the HIP and looking in the channel. And that's pretty much it for this particular HIP.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the update. Once again, if you want to read up on it, it's HIP 125, Temporary Anti-Gaming Measures for Boosted Hexes, and the link is in chat. Thank you, Jay Hella. Okay, next up, we've got IoT HIP 124, Securing IoT Governance Through Staking Rewards. Neil, if you want to take that one.
Yep. So 124 has the aim of, sorry, I was just posting the link in the chat there. It aims to increase the voting turnout on the IoT network. It's suggested to achieve this goal indirectly by paying rewards for locking IoT. So right now there's a problem that a lot of hosts are willing to give up liquidity to lock up, and by offering them incentives for doing so, we think indirectly this will increase voting turnout. So the HIP aims to give 4% of what was assigned for oracles that is currently emitted, but it's burnt. So instead of burning it, we would assign it for rewards for this. So the oracle bucket was a total of 7%, and we're suggesting that we use 4% of that for rewards for locking up. There's a big reverse switch in the HIP as such that says if oracles are ready, then this same solution happens with POC oracles. People having to stake to lock up to earn rewards. So that mechanism will exist, and we believe that mechanism enables them to increase voting turnout indirectly from that. So that's the HIP basically. I don't want to take up too much time. So, and just to say one more thing. Sorry. Yeah, at the moment we're talking about success metrics. So we want to be really clear with success metrics on this HIP. That we want to know that over a period of time, is this HIP going to pass? Is this HIP a success or a failure? And if it is a failure, then there might be further solutions to this by actually requiring some sort of vote, or requiring an abstain, or requiring them to proxy vote, which is just as good. So we want to try this option first, a soft option, the easy option of just copying, the way staking works for for HNT and applying that to IoT.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I see you posted the link to it in the chat as well. So appreciate that. Also, while you're up here, one more,
Yeah.
but if you don't mind. Yeah, HIP 123 redefining IoT data only hotspot onboarding and assertion fees.
Yeah, it's literally like it says on the tin. Basically, we want to make onboarding data only really, really cheap on the network. I mean, there's an argument to say that they're choosing to send data over the Helium network rather than private provider, so it should be free. But at the end of the day, that could be some sort of gaming metric. So the aim of the HIP is to lower the onboarding costs for them and to allow them to at least once a month update the location on their hotspots. This is data only, so it doesn't affect POC hotspots or full hotspots or light hotspots, whatever you want to call them. And just as some statistics, there's about 1,883 hotspots that are data only that aren't onboarded to the network or asserted, and that comes from the traffic on the Helium packet router. So 1,883 hotspots haven't onboarded and they haven't set the location. And I think it's a really important thing for the network that those hotspots do that. They're probably, I could argue, the most important hotspots on the network. They were set up just to transfer data. So having them, and they picked Helium, so having them on coverage maps, having them on mappers' websites is really important in my opinion, because they're most likely to be the most stable and the best set up for their devices in the area. So it would be really important to get that put on the network on chain so we can see it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Neil. Appreciate it. All right. Next up, we've got Mobile HIP 126, flexible data pricing for mobile network. Boris, if you can handle that one.
Yeah. So this HIP is tackling the problem of all data on the network being priced 50 cents a gigabyte, irrespective of location, type of hotspot, time of day, etc. So what provoked writing this HIP is, as you know, we are close to launching a beta with some of the third-party offload partners outside of just Helium Mobile. Telefonica is one of them. There is a number of them that are also in the US that are in the works. The way that in reality large carriers are willing to pay for offload data is very much tied to particular locations, and in some cases even time of day as a result of the free capacity that they may or may not have on their cellular towers. And the scheme that historically has been devised for the mobile sub-DAO, where every gigabyte is 50 cents, does not align with that. Like in Mexico, like 50 cents is very expensive anywhere at any time. In places like the US, depending on location, some service providers will pay 50 cents, some pay 5 cents, some will connect for free, some will not connect for free no matter what. So there's a lot of variability in what we'll see. So we need to adjust as the network to adopt to that, to basically allow service providers outside of just Helium Mobile to offload. So the short concept, in short, that Skip proposes is that every hotspot operator is able to set the floor price for the hotspot, and service providers then have the ability to specify on their end how much they're willing to pay at what location. And if there is a match, the connection happens. If there is no match, there is no connection. And another important piece that this HIP proposes is that we will start tracking the effective utility of a hotspot just as it's kind of like a theoretical competition at this point between the hotspots, where we will measure how many subscribers have connected to your hotspot and how much data was sent. that relates to the hotspots in your proximity. So each hotspot is going to be measured in terms of its performance relative to other hotspots that are within 5 or 10 mile radius. I don't remember exactly the number. And it will get some utility score assigned, and that utility score will be publicly available on chain. Initially, it will not affect any rewards. It's just more of like a public shaming tool. If you are the only hotspot on the block that is asking $1 per gigabyte, and because of that, nobody's connecting, but you're collecting POC still, whereas everybody else is less greedy, that will affect your utility score. Utility score is just a number, not affecting your rewards initially, but as we roll forward, the expectation is that we can start thinking about how we can have the utility score also affect potentially the POC rewards for the hotspots down the line. So that's the short summary on the HIP. The status of it is currently, I think, in discussion. So if you have thoughts, opinions, add it in GitHub as a pull request or hop into the channel for 126 and let us know what you think.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Boris. As Boris mentioned, yeah, if you have any thoughts, feel free to pop them into the channel, which I posted in chat. Next up, we've got a PR, IoT PR 1015, Dynamic IoT Proof of Coverage. Looking for Gradodge, if he's in the audience there. I'm not sure I see him.
I don't think he's available today.
Okay.
I checked. Yeah. I just kept this back in. It's one that the IoT working group have been discussing. It's very technically complicated HIP, but needs a lot of understanding on LoRaWAN parameters. But the group's been working on it. I've been talking to Gradoj about it, and it'll probably come up, I think, in the discussion on Monday if people want to hear an update on that. There will be some changes to the HIP, more detail. He's proposed, as it is, he's the one that's proposed. Probably needs a PR updating on it, and then yeah, it's an interesting HIP where the signals that the IoT hotspots send for proof of coverage are kind of standardized throughout each region. And what the plan is to be doing is to vary those signals and their strengths to more emulate sensors. So we've got a wider knowledge of the true coverage for the network based on not a single set signal, but different signals emulating different sensors for the whole possibility of what can be deployed. And it's also going to make it a bit harder for people cheating and gaming on the IoT network, that they can't. That currently all they have to do is emulate one type of signal, one type of power. But in the future, they would have to be emulating multiple types of power and multiple types of signal, and it'd be really hard for them to do that. The cost of doing that probably isn't worth the effort of doing it.
Awesome. Thank you, Waveform, for filling in there. If you get a chance, if you can put the PR in the chat, that would be awesome, just so people can read through it.
It probably needs an update, so probably best for the update to happen.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
It'll be discussed in the IoT working group tomorrow. Sorry, not tomorrow, but the next call, I expect.
Perfect. Okay, we'll leave it till then. All right, and with that, we are getting to the end of the call. So yeah, we covered a lot of ground today. Thank you to all of those people who attended, especially those from Consensus. I'm very jealous. I wish I was there. The next is happening. The next Helium community call event is happening. I believe it's Wednesday, June 26th at noon Eastern. So again, if you're looking for the events, click on Discord events. It'll pop up in there. Click the little bell icon. It'll remind you of the next call. This call has been recorded. It will be posted in Governance General shortly after this call. So if you missed the beginning portion of it and you want to hear it back, It will be posted shortly. And yeah, that is all for today, folks. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a lovely rest of the week. We'll see you next time. All right, take care, everyone.